Hello coders and welcome to another How to Code Well podcast. Today we're going to be talking about personal development and training in web development. I'm joined by Jeremy Onion. Jeremy, how are you doing? Have you had a good week?
Yeah, I'm doing well, thanks, mate. I had a really good week. Busy, as always. It's luckily cooled down now since we had the very, very hot weather a couple of weeks ago, so it's much more comfortable now.
Yeah, it has been pretty hot. And you've been traveling around, haven't you, doing some training?
Yes, for some reason on the hottest day of the year so far, I was stuck in Wembley Stadium of all places. Fantastic venue, but when it's hot, it's really hot.
Nice.
Particularly with the public transport getting there and back. It was a bit of a nightmare.
So that was what, trains and stuff like that you were on?
Yeah, so it was a train into London, then one up to Wembley Stadium from London. And in the morning it wasn't too bad.
Yeah.
It was quite nice. But in the afternoon, once we'd finished the training and I got on the train, the first one from Wembley actually to the train station was really nice. The air conditioning was working. So I walking into one of those big fridges, supermarket. So I sat down and I can get used to this.
Yeah.
And then unfortunately the one after that from London back up to Oxford wasn't the same. I think I lost about 4 stone in sweat on the trip back then.
Right. Okay. So nice, lively. So, was it a single day or more than one day?
This was just a single day. So I was actually down there doing some training on Google Cloud, being all put on by Google themselves with one of their training partners. So it was just looking at the Google Cloud offering and details on the services and how you go about using them, things like that.
Okay. And was the presentations where people were demonstrating various things, or what was the format?
Yeah, it was mainly presentation led. So it was all they had specialist trainers there who were taking you through. These are the products, these are the problems they solve, and this is how you'd go about doing it, setting up, solving it. And then there was the option to then go away and do some further training, actually using the platform as well, using Quick Labs, which is one of their preferred training partners.
Yeah. Okay. So was there anything that you took away from that in terms of a physical thing to say that you had done that?
Yeah, so there was I got a certificate of attendance for that one. So, but it's also acts as part of the journey towards certification if you want to do that. So this acts as kind of a catalyst for the initial overview of the platform that you then use to go ahead and get the cloud professional certification in that area.
And is that something that you're thinking of doing?
It is probably for that one, and also working towards the AWS cloud certifications as well. So, making sure I'm on both sides.
Yeah. Riding that fence. Yeah.
Cover all bases.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds really good. What kind of things would you be doing if you went on that journey? What other things would you be learning and stuff?
Okay, so in terms of the Google Cloud product, they've got a number of different types of certification depending on what area you're in. It's pretty much the same for AWS as well. So the sort of stuff in my role that I'm looking at are things like solution architecture, the infrastructure. I have, speaking with the AWS stuff, because I know more about that. I also have guys that work for me that are going to be doing the developer certification and the SysOps and DevOps certifications as well.
Right.
And a lot of that is going to be based around instructor-led training. So familiarity with the platform.
Right.
So it's to get these certifications, it's the same with Google as it is with AWS. You have to have a very, very solid understanding of the products within the platform, and that's the certification is showing that you have a level of comprehension about the platform.
Yeah. Okay. I get that. What is the benefit of having said certification in this industry?
It's there's twofold. A, your salary goes up quite nicely when you have these sort of certifications. But I think the key thing for people is it shows that it's not just you saying that you have this level of understanding about a topic. It shows that somebody else has said, yeah, we've tested them in whatever way, shape or form that is. And they genuinely do understand this technology. They have this understood baseline level of knowledge of products. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that somebody is going to be very experienced and very quick to build solutions using this, because that's a completely different thing. But it does mean that they at least have a understanding and an overview of, in terms of either Google or AWS, they understand what the services are, how they hang together, when you would use what, and how you would go about creating these things.
I definitely get that. The having that sort of ability and knowledge, that level of knowledge and understanding from a very specific very specific thing. I know that AWS and I would imagine Google as well, those kind of things, there's so much involved that for anyone who isn't aware of what AWS is, if they were just to look at the AWS console, it would just be a complete bag of black box. It would just be, what does SQS mean? What does a load balancer do? I mean, these are.
There are very much there's two facets to that as well. There is the, one are these services. You'll have the service on one provider, maybe called one thing. On another provider, it might be called another thing. And also, you've got that then level. Okay, this is what it is at an abstract level. It's a load balancer. It's a message queue system. It is a messaging bus. It's a pub subsystem. And then the second part is, how do we string these things together? And that's where you've got an extra level of understanding needs to be there. And the certification process for both of them actually build on from each other. So you'll have a basic level which will explain these are the services, these are the types of use cases. You'll have another level where it will go more in depth into this is how our best practice idea of how you hang these things together are. And so you again gain a deeper understanding of how these services interact and what you can do and how you can use them, which may spark you down certain roads of thinking, well, if I can do that with that and I can do that with that, you can start doing this with this and take you off over there. But it is very much about gauging a level of understanding and not necessarily a level of experience. And this is where I get quite I'm in two minds very much about the whole certification system, if we put it that way. Because to my mind, you've got two things for any developer when you're working in web dev or any other area. Developers are developers, whether you have your tool use is desktop, web, systems, service systems. It's all development at the end of the day. And you have comprehension and competence. So your comprehension is, do I understand the subject matter? Do I understand about load balancers, about the machine learning services that are there? Do I actually understand this? Do I have a theoretical knowledge of this and understand what these things are and how they work? Right. And then you got competence, which is, can I actually use these things? Now, you can gain the competence without necessarily doing the comprehension part, because if you're actively using these products on a day-by-day basis, you can probably string them together. You're probably being able to get the results you want without necessarily having that initial understanding of what's going on under the hood. I totally dig that. Because I mean, sorry to interrupt, but when I started learning PHP, it was like I didn't really understand what these functions did. I just knew that if I strung them together, they did this, right? But I didn't know what an array was when I started. It also follows into other things like even if you're doing something like, say, JavaScript, working with maybe React or Vue.js or something like that, then you'll be exposed to good, solid object-oriented design principles and things like that because of the way the framework's constructed. However, if you ask someone to explain what's dry, what's solid,
Mm-hmm.
what's dependency injection, all these things, they're probably going to look at you blank and say, I haven't got a clue.
And of course,
When you ask them, how do you get the database abstraction in, how do you use that within your model?
Yeah.
They'll probably be able to say, oh, you do this.
Yeah.
But they won't necessarily know why or what that's called or why it's done that way. They just know, well, that's what I do and that's how I do it.
And of course, on the flip side of that, you can know what it is and not know how to do it.
Yes.
You can know the theory, as you've said, but you might not have that experience.
Exactly. And I've seen, I've worked with code bases where you can see the person understood a concept like abstraction, but it's then taken to the nth degree. And because of the lack of experience, it's overuse of a concept or underuse of the concept. So you can see, well, I can understand how they got there because I understand the theory of what they're trying to achieve. But the practice, the experience is obviously slightly lacking there because you can see they've not quite nailed it or they've not quite grasped it fully. When applying it in a practical sense.
Definitely, yeah.
This is where you got the two sides of it. And for me, laughing about this before, but for me, Scott, who was the last podcast that was released before we recorded this, so that's Scott Ambler, who's the guy from the Agile company, was saying about these 3-day courses where you can't become a Scrum Master in 3 days. And I think it's exactly that. You can get a certification to say that you understand and you have the tools and you understand the tools to do a role, but that experience is also key as well. You have to have both. I know certainly with the AWS certifications, they suggest that to get a certain certification, you should have a certain amount of time of experience. To my knowledge, they don't, there's no way of ensuring that is definitely the case. So as long as you understand, all the products well enough to reach that level, I'm not aware that there is a component of that says that you have to have been working with the technology for X number of months or years. However, to be able to answer the questions, you probably are going to have that level of in-depth knowledge. But with other certifications, it may not be the same. And also it depends on the certification as well, because obviously there's WordPress certifications available, Drupal ones, Vue.js, and very much like Scott said as well, it also depends on who's issuing the certificate.
Yes.
Yes. And understanding what the certificates are, because, for example, with Drupal, you've got, you've got Gram Wizard, you've also got Site Builder and things like that. Now, if you're a site builder, that doesn't necessarily mean that you are a coder or a developer at a high level. You are still a developer. You are still doing a development role. However, your tool is actually configuring and setting up Drupal and utilizing what's there as opposed to writing custom modules, which falls more under the Drupal Master and Drupal Grandmaster certification. So there is, certainly for me as a manager, there's needing to understand exactly okay, there's a certification. What does that actually show that they have knowledge of?
Yeah. I mean, just thinking back to some of our previous podcasts, this is the third one that you've been on. We did a whole podcast. I'll put links to those in the show notes below. But the one we did previously, we were talking about CVs and cover letters and career progression and all that good stuff. I guess from that perspective, when someone says that they have a certification on a CV, it's then you then need to go through a level of investigation as to, well, what does that mean? Yeah, and how long ago was that certification?
And what does it cover, and what's the level of how in depth does that go?
Yeah.
So as examples, when I've been looking for people to fill DevOps roles, it's possible to get certification in Jenkins, for example. I don't know if you're aware of that, but CloudBees actually do a Jenkins certification, and there are various other ones. So yeah, it's a case of understanding what was the syllabus, what level did it go into, and what value does that actually add to them. And obviously there is a bit of a trade-off, and it's kind of back to this whole, do you need to have gone to university to be a developer?
Yeah.
No, you don't. Definitely don't. Josh can attest to that. That's the guy who went from the call center to coder. Myself, I also never went to university. I kind of found my way in. You don't need to, but there is a missing element if you've not gone that more formalized education route, where theory sometimes can be missing. I was quite lucky because when I was getting into the industry, there were a lot of the only books you could get dealt with a lot of things like database abstraction, normalization, all those sort of things. That was still part and parcel of the whole development process. Now there are so many, with YouTube, things like Udemy and YouTube videos and stuff like that. No disrespect to anybody that does those sort of videos, but they can sometimes gloss over some of the theory that you might get and some of the fixes you'll get if you're doing an instructor-led course as well. So things like Code School and Udemy are good and they have their place. I've used them myself to good effect as well. But they will only teach you exactly what's shown, one way to do it, and because of the style of course it can only go to a certain level. If you have questions, you then start to have to look elsewhere to do that. Whereas if you're doing things like instructor-led training, which is obviously what I was doing with Google, I've got more training coming up with other providers to help me with the certification. You actually have the chance to ask questions of either the people you're learning with, and that's always a fantastic environment to be in when you've got a whole group of you. They're all learning the same thing together because you can bounce ideas off of each other. You can, if you're too worried about holding up your hand and asking a question, which can be scary to anybody. Like I know from both sides of the fence, both from doing presentations and that, and also being sat there, one thinking, am I daft for not getting this? He's not explained that. You can always turn to the person next to you and say, what's he talking about? What does this mean?
Yeah.
Or you can actually ask the instructor, which gives you that that extra bit of can help you get that extra bit of understanding you need if you've not quite understood something. And also, if you're doing labs or you're actually doing coursework as part of the course, they can make sure that your understanding is actually solid. Because I might see a YouTube tutorial, I might go away and do something thinking, well, that's kind of what he did, so this must be the way to do it, and then later on, I'll find out that that's the daft way to do it. You didn't really understand what he was getting at. Your missing bit of understanding is this, and it should really be done this way.
Am I right in thinking that these certifications are like a totally different level to Udemy, self-teaching? Are they more specific? Are the people in that class, have they already decided the path that they wish to take, and do they have a bigger level of experience than, say, someone who just wants to see if they could be a coder and just try out a Udemy course?
I would say not necessarily. I'd say it's one of the key things with the certification is it's far more rigorous in assessing your understanding of the topic. So you could complete the Udemy course. You could have, certainly with Code School, which is the one I'm more used to, you could put all sorts of stuff into the code editor, and as long as you got the right result at the end of it, that's good enough. So there's only testing to make sure that you're actually able to produce the result that's needed, not necessarily that your methodology for doing so is correct.
I see.
Whereas if you're doing a certification, the same as if you're doing a degree or something like that, you're actually being assessed not just on the outcome, but on the steps that get you there as well. In fairness, when you're doing things like the AWS certification, they are computer-timed multiple choice questions, but when you've got 4 options and the difference between them is just one word, and you've got to work out exactly which one is correct for the question, they really do go to a level of detail in terms of testing your knowledge. And I think that's the key thing. It's actually something that with Udemy and something like that, they're great to to get a feel for something and to understand it, but they're not going to. You can't say I've done this Udemy course, therefore I am I'm seen to be an expert in this. Or have that baseline of knowledge. Yeah. Whereas with certification, you can do. In terms of whether or not it's something you would investigate yourself, it really does depend on your circumstances.
Right, because these things are expensive, right? These things are very expensive.
They can be very expensive. Yeah. Certainly for the basic. So for the lowest tier of the AWS certification, you're looking at $100 for the exam fee. That's just for the exam fee. That's not taking into account any courses you might want to take to do that. Yep. Courses can run to £2,000 to £3,000. Similar to a boot camp or something like that, in terms of the outlay. So for most people, particularly if you're just getting into it, you definitely aren't going to want to spend that. Sure. If I'm just sort of breaking into an industry, I'm not going to fork out $4,000 just to get a certification to say I know what I'm doing. But like I said, it's that doesn't show experience or competence. It just shows comprehension. So you will probably find that most of these certifications, hopefully your company would be willing to put you through or to help finance. Okay. I know, certainly, from people I know, they've been able to do certifications that might be, the company may not necessarily be up for doing it, but they've said, well, we'll part fund it and you part fund it and things like that. So there are always options there, but certainly, there are, whichever area you're in. So if you're in, if you do front end, back end, full stack, a few more into the DevOps, things like that, there are certifications out there for everybody. Zend, for example, do the PHP engineer certifications. I do know of people that have done them off their own back and paid for it themselves. Yeah. But I think you'd have to have been in the industry a long time to feel the need for that. Yeah,
you're kind of like, when you do that kind of stuff, you're kind of invested in it, right? This is what I do now for a living, and therefore I am going to be tested on it. Yes. It's not just someone who's just come out of school and gone, I could be a PHP developer, so I'm going to do this Zend thing. I mean, I'm sure there might be people who've done that before, but this is more of an intense level of training, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and it's more rigorous as well. Certainly, with most certifications, people will have to check your who you are, who you say you are, so they can make sure it's actually you that did it. Because they are, at the end of the day, their reputation is saying that you have this level of knowledge.
That's right. Yeah.
If you rock up with this certification and you know nothing about the subject matter, or come across as knowing nothing about the subject matter, that kind of devalues the certification then, and people are going to think, oh, well, it's not worth the paper it's printed on.
And also some of these certifications, they expire, right? So yes. I know with the PHP stuff, it obviously gets updated with the Zend training when PHP gets updated. So there's no need to be like certified on a PHP 5 level when everyone's in PHP 7.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's a good way of keeping your skills on point. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's the same with the cloud certifications as well. They, although luckily Google, AWS don't actually issue new exams every time they change something, because they change something every other week. If you ever listen to the AWS podcast, literally every other week there's an update show, and there's normally an hour's worth of updates that they go through rapid fire. Wow. Some of them are just simple, like, oh, there's new instances, but 9 times out of 10 there's at least 1 or 2 new services that are available. So you can imagine trying to keep on top of that. It can be a full-time job in itself. So luckily it's not always the latest greatest. It's just the core the core services and how you use them, and then obviously people will keep themselves updated anyway, hopefully.
So let's move on to just general personal development in web development. I probably need to phrase that differently because it's 2 words of development together. But when personal development as a developer, let's say, for example, that I'm not able to do these certifications for some reason whatsoever, out of my control. Is there any way I can train myself to be more efficient, more goal orientated, perhaps, to actually achieve the target in mind? Is there any advice that you can give?
Yeah, definitely. I'll kind of split this into two things here. So with the initial, how do you? So you're not able to go on training courses. How do you improve as a developer? How do I upskill? How do I make sure that I'm upskilling in the right direction? Things like meetups are invaluable for things like that. So I can almost guarantee wherever you are, there will be a local PHP meetup or a JavaScript meetup, WordPress meetup, Drupal one. If you qualify, the code bar ones are absolutely fantastic. I've actually been to two so far. We've got a third one coming up this month as well. We were lucky enough to be able to sponsor some of the Oxford ones.
Excellent, that's great to hear.
So a quick plug there, but the plug is for CodeBar themselves. They do an absolutely fantastic job. And the key thing there is being able to talk to other developers. Ideally, you'll find that there are people that are either slightly or a lot further on in their journey. And nowadays, I tend to find most developers are more than happy to help you, to mentor people. You might get the odd one that's not terribly socially skilled, shall we say.
Very diplomatic.
But on the whole, particularly at meetups and things like that, all the ones I've been to, everybody's been really welcoming, happy to talk to you, happy to help. Quite often, if you take your laptop with you, they'll even give you advice on your project there and there. Certainly the WordPress ones that I've been to in Oxford, it's been very much based around, there'll be a talk and then people will help you with the issues you've got. So use those sort of resources. Reach out to people when they're doing office hours. I know some of the crew on Ladybug do that quite often. So you use these personal interactions to ask questions and to get that level of feedback. In terms of actually being able to have the discipline to improve, which can be a lot more difficult.
Well, definitely, because you can have the motivation, but it's having the discipline. It's having that sort of like that thing that sort of voice on the side of your shoulder saying, you shouldn't be doing this now. You should be doing that, because doing this is not going to help you progress into whatever it is that you want to achieve. So how do you get disciplined?
There are a couple of tricks and techniques that I either use or I know about. The first one, which is one I've used very successfully in the past myself, is something that's referred to normally as habit setting. Okay. So everybody's probably heard of goal setting. Yeah. So goal setting might be, for example, the worst one is I want to lose weight. Yeah. Most people can relate to that either personally or someone they know has said, that's it, I'm going to lose weight. Okay, that really is not going to help, because how much are you going to lose? How are you going to do it? When you do it by, if we were talking business speak now, that's not a smart objective.
Right, okay.
But if we pick something a bit more sensible, like, okay, I'm going to set a goal. I'm going to complete the Couch to 5K course. That's brilliant. I'm probably going to want to time box that. The Couch to 5K is 9 weeks, as you can guess. I've tried to do this a few times myself. So, occasionally I might have to, I might not be able to make the gym or something like that. So I'm going to say 12 weeks time, I'm going to complete Couch to 5K. So I've now got this goal. I've got this end point that's, I've got to wait 12 weeks before I get gratification of having completed this. That's the first problem with doing it that way. So the second problem is, even though I've been smart, it's measurable, it's obtainable, it's realistic, it's time boxed.
Yeah, you know the acronym.
I know most of them. I'm relatively good at remembering them at a push.
I was going to do a cheeky Google then, just to see what it was, and then test you.
So specific. The M's always the one that trips me up. Attainable, realistic, time boxed, measurable. Measurable.
Yeah.
So you have to have and doing the Couch to 5K in 12 weeks is all of those things. I've got a time limit. It's realistic. It must be realistic. Thousands of people have done it. Some of them in worse shape than me. So it's got to be possible. But what will happen is you'll do week 1, you'll feel really good about it. You'll manage week 2. Something will happen and you don't quite get through week 3. So you're already a week late. That's all right. I gave myself a buffer. I've still got 3 weeks buffer. And then you get to about week 5 and then you end up repeating a week because it's getting, it's starting to get really hard now. You're talking 15 minutes in one go. What? And then you're sort of like, well, and then all of a sudden it's, well, I'm only going to have 2 weeks left over the time. I may as well. And then it gets easier and easier and easier to just put it off, and it doesn't end up happening.
I guess it's when, and I find this when sometimes I go nuts when I run, and it's like, there's a big portion of say in a month, there's like, I'll run 3 nights in the first week, and then in the second week it gets 2 runs, and then in the third week I'm only doing it 1 night, but I'm still running, so I'm still, but I'm not, in the sense that I'm not actually continuing on my routine, and then you end up not running longer than you were running. So
it's consistency that's the key thing. But I think part of the key thing there is actually about gratification as well. So if I was to say to you, you can have this bar of chocolate, or substitute your favorite food now, or you can have this slightly bigger one in a week,
right?
And have this one now. Now, 9 times out of 10, if you're feeling peckish, you're going to, sod it, I'm going to have that now. Week older me can worry about that at the time. I'm going to have this now. We're relatively hardwired not to see that far into the future. Most people don't think beyond the next week necessarily. Long-term planning is not something that humans are good at, because our concept of time is very much present and immediate future. It's just the way we're hardwired. So instead of setting that, and I'll use running as the example still, because it's something that everybody can relate to, no matter what developer or what role they do. So instead of saying I'm going to complete the Couch to 5K, I'm going to do it in 12 weeks, you set a habit, and what you do is you say, do you know what? Forget all this long-term crap. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'm going to make sure I do 30 minutes running.
Okay,
that's it. 30 minutes. It could be a slow jog, it could be fast walk, doesn't matter. I'm just going to make sure that I find time on those 3 days a week to do that. That's it. Simple as that. And then Monday comes and you actually manage to get your shoes on, you get out the door. Yes, I've done it. Instant gratification. I've completed my goal. If I had a check, if I had a list, I could tick it off. Brilliant. Feeling good about that. Wednesday. Do you know what? It's just the one run. I've only, I haven't got this, I've got to do 12 weeks. I've got to do such and such by such and such time. It is just as simple. I've just got to go out and do 30 minutes now running. So Wednesday I go out, I manage to motivate myself for that because it's a small, easy, manageable thing. Job done, big tick. Friday comes round. Well, I managed the other 2 days. It can't be that bad. And it is just I'm only focusing on doing that one thing for that small length of time. I'm not worried about the fact that it's, 12 weeks worth of pain to get there or anything like that. It is literally a rolling, just small wins that are going to slowly build up and build up. Now, if you're doing something like 100 days of code, then, you can use a similar thing. So 100 days of code, correct me if my understanding is wrong, because this is something that I came to the party rather late on. But my understanding is the idea is that for 100 days, you're going to do a little bit of coding every day. And the idea is just build up a little bit of knowledge and, 10 minutes, 20 minutes or something like that.
So I have my own personal view on the 100 days of code, because you can look at the hashtag and you can see so many people doing awesome stuff, and they're busting their guts every day doing it. And then you also see a bunch of people who, for some reason out of their control, just haven't been able to do it that particular day, and they've been so hard on themselves. So I take a very sort of backseat view on this. I think that you can do the 100 days of code without actually writing code. You could listen to a coding podcast. You could read a coding book. You could just think about code. You could design some sort of diagram on the train, on your commute. You don't actually physically need to press a button on the keyboard to be a coder. Because at the end of the day, like, when we're coding up stuff, we read code more than we write code. So, just reading code is an act of coding.
Yes, definitely. And also, if we kind of look back to, towards the beginning of the podcast, that comprehension bit does need to be there as well. You do need to understand these things. So, yeah, I completely agree. But it's the reason it should work is because it is using habit setting rather than goal setting.
Sure. Yeah.
All right. You've got this. You're going to do 100 days, but it's just a way of forcing you to do a little bit every day.
Yeah.
To get that habit ingrained. And I completely agree with you. Don't worry about on a Friday evening when you got back from work and it's really hot and you're fed up. Get yourself a glass of your favorite tipple. Whack on the How to Code Well podcast. Learn about what other people are doing. It's all good learning. It's all good knowledge.
Yeah.
Exactly the same with read a book. Do a little bit. Draw something. Just spend 5 minutes. Just try and do a tiny bit every day, but don't bust the gun and don't set this long-term massive goal.
Yeah.
But you shouldn't be doing that anyway, because one of the first things you need to learn as a developer, and any developer at all, is if you have a large problem, I need to achieve this. What's the first thing you do as a developer? You break it down into small, easy to manage chunks, and you do those little bits until it builds up to the whole.
Yeah.
You don't write an entire website from scratch.
No.
Break it down into the small component parts, and you build those up.
Yeah.
And you use that to then build up. And a habit setting is just exactly doing that. It's doing the small steps and celebrating those small steps that are eventually going to get you to your end goal. And, let's not beat around the bush. There is going to be an end goal there. It's not a case of, there is no, reason, it's just something I'm doing ad infinitum. There's a reason and there's an end goal, but it's celebrating those small victories, those small wins. And it's a different mindset. So I've actually managed to go to the gym today. Yes, go me. I've managed 3 times this week. I don't care. Every single day I've celebrated that a little bit. Yeah. Now, if I've celebrated with a pint and a bar of chocolate, I'm probably not doing much help. But, you celebrate the small victories.
I would also like to say that I have seen people who beat themselves up on Twitter because they haven't been able to achieve the 100 days of code. And then what they do, some of them, is they bunch all the days that they haven't been able to do it on the weekend. And then they basically bulk code,
so they burn out.
And then they burn out. Yeah. And some I lurk a lot on Twitter. I'm a bit of a Twitter lurker, and I kind of go back through the timelines, and I can see a repeated pattern. It's like this is the same thing you were doing the other week, and the same thing you were doing the week before. This isn't like you said. It's not a smart target. It's
no. It's not, and it's not. It's you need to not get caught up in this. It's a whole problem with social media anyway, and we could do probably about 5 podcasts on that. But it's this whole thing, to do with things like imposter syndrome and stuff like that. Everybody started somewhere. Nobody comes out of the room knowing how to code.
Yeah.
I may have met 2 possible exceptions in my entire life, but them aside, the rest of humanity, you don't come out with the ability to do these things. You are, everybody has to learn, and it's how you learn as well. Some people learn. I mean, I used to really love reading computer books. To be fair, I'm that old that there wasn't much choice back then. But so YouTube wasn't really an option in the same way as it is now, and things like that. Now I much prefer to use either videos or to use things like, say, Quick Labs, where you'll get written instructions, but it's very hands-on. I'm a very hands-on learner, I've discovered, quite late in life. So all the theoretical learning I used to do, it just doesn't seem to gel with me as well anymore. But it's, learning how to be a developer and staying sharp as a developer isn't just about writing code.
No. It's
about understanding new practices, understanding about new ways of doing things, talking to people. Understanding people. I mean, if you're doing 100 days of code, one of the first things you're probably doing is trying to think of an idea of something to code.
Yep. I get
What do you like to do that? Chat to people.
I get asked this all the time. I was asked this over the weekend. I was doing a live stream on Twitch, and someone just came out with, what application should I build first? And that is such a common question. Such a common question, because it's sort of like you need to have that idea of what to build, and then you need to think about how to build it, and then you need to learn the technologies around it. Or do you start just learning the technologies and then somehow build something off the back of it? It's a very common question. I think, personally, I think one of the best applications to build is a to-do application, because then you're looking at you're exposed to various different types of complexities and problems. So data storage, relational data, the view, the controller, the model, all of that kind of thing is encompassing in that. And at the end of the day, you get something that allows you to you can use that. You can use that as a to-do app to write to-dos on what you want to learn next. So it's not one of these things where you just build something and go, oh, I've built that, never going to use it. So you have that desire of wanting to make it good. Yeah.
And I think the other thing that with any first project is you have to understand the domain. That you're trying. Now everybody understands a to-do list.
Yeah.
That's something that's ubiquitous. Everybody knows and understands what a to-do list is, what it should do. Mm-hmm. You may have some extra fancy things that you want to do with it, like filters, or, if you use get things done methodology and things like that. There's all sorts of stuff you can add onto it. But I agree, it's a good starting place. The other thing I would say is scratch an itch.
Scratch an itch, definitely.
Most big projects and things like that have come out of someone just scratching an itch.
Definitely.
Because if you've got this problem, if there's something that you're thinking that's lacking, the world really needs this new widget, I can guarantee at least one or two other people are probably thinking that as well. Yeah. You'll probably find it's possibly even more than that. So scratch an itch, find a problem, one preferably that you understand, because if you don't understand the problem you're trying to solve, you're never going to build anything that solves it. Because you can, keep it nice and simple, but scratch an itch.
Well, I had a great conversation with Stefan Doherty on the podcast on a previous show, and he learnt programming whilst working in insurance, and he was learning to solve the problems that he had, very specific niche problems that he was having, but he was using coding to solve those. Yeah, and so he came out with obviously the knowledge of the programming, but also a very efficient tool. And it was that desire and that need and that requirement to do that. That was one of the drivers. That was
data entry. Tool he made, didn't he?
I thought that was amazing. An amazing approach to this.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic. And scratching an itch.
Yeah,
it really was. I've got this thing that I'm sure should be better, should be easier. So do something about it. Definitely.
Yeah. Okay, so habit tracking. Let's get back to that a minute. How do you track this habit?
So it should be something that is a set thing. So I'm going to do 20 days or 20 minutes or something every day, or on these days I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. And then it is a case of just celebrating and making sure that you just do that every day. So set reminders on your phone, for example. So if I know, say the gym. So I know I need to go to the gym every day. I'll do things, and there are a lot of things you can do to make your life easier with this as well. But if I know I'm doing Monday, Wednesdays, Fridays, I'm going to the gym, set an alarm before I leave in the morning that says, don't forget your gym bag. I'll make sure my gym is in the car then. One of the things I actually genuinely did when I looked for a gym was make sure that it was between work and home. So that I would literally have to drive past it on my way home. And consciously make the decision not to go in there.
That's good.
Now, see, if I'd gone home first, I'd have got home and sat down and thought, do you know what? I'll do it tomorrow instead. It's easier. But if I'm driving past it on my way home, it's so much easier to just pop in, do that, and get home. It's that's an important thing for anything that you're trying to change. Anything you're trying to change habit-wise in your life, make it easier to do the thing than not do the thing. So crow about it as well a bit on social media. Make sure it's something that's manageable. So don't put yourself into a position where you're doing something that is almost impossible or is really difficult to keep up, and then try and get peer pressure to force you into doing something you're not enjoying, that you're having trouble keeping up, because that's going to have the reverse effect. But if it is something simple like, I'm going to make sure I do something for 20 minutes related to development. So it could be listening to the podcast or watching YouTube tutorials, or sitting down and sketching out what an interface might look at, or even just writing down a list of things you might be able to do and, just thinking about them. And this is the thing, it could be, you could just be sat down thinking about, well, what app could I write? 20 minutes doing that. That's development. Yeah. How much time do we spend thinking about what to name things, how to implement something, how we're going to solve a problem? It's all part and parcel of this industry. These are key skills you're going to have going forward.
Yeah.
They're all valid skills. They're all valid things to do.
Yeah.
So do that. But I think make it easy to do, and set yourself reminders that you need to do them. So there's no excuse of, I forgot. If your phone goes off and says, don't forget you're going to the gym this evening, you've got no excuse to not have your gym kit in the bag. I'll be honest, I tend to, when I get home, I repack my bag and put it in straight away the following day. So it's always in the back of the car. But yeah, and I believe there's quite strong science that shows that after about 6 weeks of doing something regularly, it will actually start to become a habit anyway, and you'll automatically start to think to do those things. So if you manage for about 6 to 7 weeks of always going to the gym, the chances are you will actually start to think about that automatically without even necessarily realizing it. Okay. So you may find that one day you've planned, I'm not going to the gym this week. And if you've been doing it regularly for a year, every so often, you'll end up going, oh, no, I shouldn't have gone down this road. I don't know if you've ever had that when you've moved house. You've lived somewhere for years and years and years. You drive home and you have to, for the first few weeks, you have to think. Yeah. Don't go that way, go this way. Otherwise, you end up parked outside your house thinking, hang on a minute.
It becomes muscle memory. Yeah.
So, and this is one of the key things why you're doing it as a habit. It becomes muscle memory. It becomes that ingrained. I always do it. I always do this. Why do you always go to the gym Monday, Wednesday, Friday? Well, I've always done it. It becomes that.
It becomes wrong and not doing it.
Yes, you start to, you go off on holiday and think, I should be in the gym now.
Yeah.
Or you actually go out for a run in the middle of London, even though you're supposed to be having a fantastic holiday, or the Bahamas or wherever you happen to be. Actually running on the beach, finding out that, running on sand, it really is hard.
Yeah, I've done that before. That sort of stuff.
So those are the key things. Make it easy and set yourself reminders, alarms to make sure you start doing it.
Okay.
And be realistic about what you can achieve as well. Don't get into this mindset that I have to, I have to be coding to code, or I have to do this, that, and the other. Be easy on yourself. Ease yourself in gradually. Because the other thing you can always do is you can always build it up. So you could say, do you know what? I'm going to, initially, my habit, what habit am I going to set? I'm going to make sure I go for a walk for a half hour every day. I'm not going to go into a full run. I'm just going to make sure that after tea or after a certain program or a certain gap in whatever's going on, I'm just going to get my backside up off the couch and go for a walk for a half hour. Job done. And then you can slowly build on that. So you can then, either change slightly or increase frequency of things like that. But celebrating the small wins and doing small incrementals rather than that.
Yeah.
Involved is a lot more obtainable, and you'll find it's more likely to stick.
Yeah.
Than the big goal setting.
Yeah, I guess it's very tempting to make these broad goals and try and shoot for the stars. Everyone says to do all that stuff, but you have to get quite granular when you're actually trying to change your own habits and stuff, and you have to do all sorts of things to trick yourself as well. Like I remember, this was going back a few years now, I gave up chocolate. I think it might have been for Lent or something daft. I decided that for some reason I wanted to give up chocolate, and I put all the chocolate that was given to me, because for some silly reason I decided to do it over the Easter thing. So we had lots of chocolate, and I think it even went over a portion of Christmas or what have you. We put all the chocolate in a shoebox, and we shut the shoebox. We put sellotape on the shoebox, and we put it at the top of the kitchen cupboard, which meant that in order to get the chocolate down, we would have to get a chair, to stand on the chair, to pull down the box, to undo the sellotape.
Yeah.
So it's what you were saying about driving past the gym. You put yourself in a very guilty mindset if you pick up, if you get a chocolate bar from that box, because you have to do so much stuff in order to achieve that. And it was sort of, when we were given the chocolate and we had to put it in the box, that was sort of like really difficult because you were constantly aware of the chocolate that was available. So that was the hardest part. But you ended up with just this mountain of chocolate and you didn't really know what to do with it. I think we gave a lot of it away.
I can imagine. Yeah, it's I don't know. I'm going to show my age, something chronic now, but there was a film, The War of the Roses. I don't know if you've ever seen that. Danny DeVito.
No, I haven't. No.
Kathleen Turner and Michael Douglas. So the Danny DeVito plays a lawyer, and it's Kathleen Turner and Michael Douglas are a couple.
Right.
They're getting divorced and they're at war, and it's comedy. It's quite a funny thing. But on the key thing is on Danny DeVito's character's desk, there's a nice little perspex box with a cigarette in.
Right.
And it's his last cigarette. So it's the last cigarette from the packet, and as long as he doesn't smoke that, he's not going to smoke anymore. That was his way of doing a similar thing to you with the chocolate.
I see.
And then about halfway through the film, it gets too much that he just throws it on the floor and smokes it. But that's that same idea, is to, if I don't have that one last thing, or I don't, if I make it difficult to have that thing, I'm not And it's amazing how you can fool yourself, because obviously the easiest solution to that is, well, I'll go down the shop and get some, then I don't have to climb up and undo the sellotape. But it's about, but it is fooling your brain into thinking, well, that's, I don't want to do that behavior, therefore I'm going to make it more difficult to do or easier to do the other behavior.
Yes.
And therefore you'll go to do that. It's the path of least resistance. Another good development technique as well.
Yeah.
So make it easy.
Yeah, definitely. Is there any other techniques that one can look at in order to improve their personal development?
There's two more that I think are quite interesting. One of which is responsible, allegedly, according to a lot of articles I've read, for the formation of Amazon itself. Okay. So it's obviously quite a good one.
Right.
So it's cool. It's a fantastic title. It's called the Regret Minimization Framework.
Wow.
It's a fantastic title, and it is so simple.
Regret minimization. Okay.
The Regret Minimization Framework. So the simple way it goes, and I'm sure that you and a lot of freelancers can probably relate to this in the way that Jeff Bezos used it originally. So the question was, do I quit my job, my salary, I've got my house to feed, and do I take a chance on doing something with this new internet monarchy that's coming on the screen? So he used this framework, and it's very simple. You say, in 5 years' time, because 5 years is something you can kind of comprehend. What am I going to wanting to be doing in 5 years? It's something you can get your head around to an extent. Which am I going to regret more? Having tried to do something with the internet and failed, or not having tried at all?
Right.
And the answer to that is simple. So whatever you're going to regret more, having done or not done, then that's the one you do, because that's what you're trying to do is minimize regret. You don't want to get to your deathbed, because there are so many people on their deathbed who say, I wish I'd done this, I wish I'd done that, I wish I'd done something else. So if something is something you really feel that if you were at that point you would regret not doing, do it. If it's something you would regret doing, don't do it.
That's a very I definitely relate to that. It's a very difficult to accept, right? Because you have to really nail down the regrets, and then you have to really think about am I really going to be regretting this, or is this something that, how long term is this goal? Is this something that I can just do in the next few weeks, or is this something that I need to do in the next 5 years? And then the bigger the thing, the more planning is involved. And then the more investment you have to put in, and but it's a very rewarding process, because you're reflecting on where you are now, and you're reflecting on where you want to be in the future. Reflecting in where that doesn't make sense, but you're kind of thinking, I'm here now. This is where I am, but this isn't where I want to be. And the reason why I don't want to be here is because I'm having this conversation with myself right now, right? So something needs to change. And then you're like, well, in 5 years' time, where should I be? In 10 years' time, where would I want to be? And then work backwards. One thing I did when I started going freelance, or when I was thinking about going freelance, is I'm sure there is a word for this. I'm sure there is a methodology for this, but I can't remember it. I think I saw it on a YouTube video somewhere. And this is to draw out a triangle. Right. So you draw out a triangle, and then you split it into portions. So you draw horizontal lines. And I think there was like 3 lines. So you split it up into 3 portions. The bottom portion is obviously the biggest portion, and the top portion is the smallest portion. So the top portion is like the ultimate goal. And then the middle portion is where you would like, how you can get to that point. And the biggest portion is all this micro things you can do in order to get to the second portion. And then the second portion will be all the things that you need to do to get to the last bit. It doesn't always work like that. Sometimes there's more than 3, you can make this triangle as big as you want. But it kind of forces you to acknowledge that, you need to do a lot of small things first before you do the bigger things. So I kind of did that. And that was, I went through all sorts of things, just accepting the fact that I wanted to be a freelancer, and where I was at the time wasn't where I wanted to be. And there was a lot of sort of like self-reflection. Yes. And I think that's really important to have. And then once you get bitten by that bug of where I am isn't where I want to be, then you start thinking about, well, what can I do to achieve all of these things?
That kind of leads into a bit with the habit setting, where you have to think of your goal and break it down. And that, as developers, that's what we do. You know that the whole is made up of loads of constituent parts. So let's tackle those one at a time. And that can help sometimes when you're feeling a bit overwhelmed by something as well. I'm not saying that this is a cure for anxiety or depression or anything like that. Not by a long chalk. But if you're looking at what seems to be an insurmountable problem, try and break it down into smaller bits. So I want to achieve this. Well, that's a massive goal. Well, if I just achieve this, and then once I've done that, I can do this other bit.
Yes.
And then I maybe do this, and then I'm already halfway to where I want to be, and then. It's like you can't go from Cheltenham to London unless you map out your route.
Sure.
And it's the thing, you cannot go, you cannot get to where you want to be, unless you know where you are.
Yes.
And that's that self-reflection bit.
Yeah.
And understand what's missing.
Yeah.
I would say that it's, if I was talking from a business head on, you're talking about gap analysis and critical path analysis. So gap analysis is literally, where are we now? Where do you need to be? What are the gaps that we need to fill in? Critical path analysis is, right, which bits do we genuinely need to do to get there, and what's fluff? You might do some of the fluff on the way there, but it's these are the steps that I absolutely have to do to get there, and these are the fluffy bits, some of which might make it a bit easier, so I might incorporate them. And the beauty of that triangle was that when you think of the big goal, the ultimate goal, because there's only a smaller portion at the top, you don't have enough room to write every little thing. So you have to be very abstract. And then the more you work down the triangle, the more room you've got to work with, and the more detailed you can become. And then once, you take a step back and you look, there's actually loads of little goals that I need to achieve before I actually get to that point. Then that becomes more realistic. And then you can start working habits through to actually achieve those things. Definitely. And celebrating them as well. Celebrate the little goals. Celebrate the little wins. Because it all adds up, and it makes you feel better all along the way. Because if you're waiting until you've achieved that, until you've actually climbed Everest before you're going to celebrate,
Yes.
That's a long wait and a lot of work for no payoff.
It is.
Whereas if you're going to celebrate, I got to base camp. Yes, I've managed to get to stage 1. Fantastic. If you're celebrating those wins, you feel like you've achieved something already. Mm-hmm. So you've got that rolling sense of achievement. It's not that, you're not focusing on, my God, I've got the rest of the mountain to climb.
Yeah.
You're focusing, my goodness, I've already climbed this bit. It's fantastic.
Yes.
And that's going to help as well with dealing with the fact that it's possibly a mammoth task that you're going to do. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, with the regret minimization framework, it is all about understanding, what is, and it makes you evaluate what's actually important to you.
Yeah.
Because if you're going to regret something, or you feel that you're going to really regret something, has to be a reason for that.
Sure.
So there has to be some sort of driver that leads you to feel that that's something that's going to make you happier, wealthier, better at your job, whatever it is that your need is, and the term goal is. So I think it's quite an interesting and quite a fun one.
Yeah.
But I think it's useful for those, or partly useful for those big life-changing decisions you have to make.
Yeah.
And there's another technique, and that is probably even more relevant to people like you and myself that have done big life-changing things before. It's not a technique I've used yet. I'm still only finding out about it, but I think it's definitely worth people looking into, and that's called fear setting. So this is taking goal setting and completely turning it on its head.
Right.
So the general idea behind fear setting. So I've heard about this via TED Talk, and I'll give you details of the main article about it, so you can link to it in the show notes if anybody's interested. It is an interesting read, and it's a very, very interesting idea. But the basis of it is that you have something that you're worried about doing that you might think it would be good, but the thought of it terrifies you. Mm-hmm. So from the point of view of the person that was doing the TED Talk, they had a successful business in the States, and they were offered the chance to go and stay in London in the UK for a couple of months. And although they realized it would probably be good for them, for their mental health, because they hadn't had a holiday for a couple of years because they're building up the company, and they be able to see wonderful things. Mm-hmm. He was absolutely terrified about the thought, and he had all of these irrational fears about what to do. So it was like, oh my goodness, the tax man might try to contact me and I don't respond, and therefore the company goes under, or they take the company off me, or I get to London, it just rains all the time, because after all, it is the UK. And loads of, it's kind of irrational feels, but they were rational to him. Mm-hmm. So what he did was he actually sat down and worked out and wrote down on paper every fear that he had about what could happen. So it was so there was what if I receive a letter from the taxman and I don't respond? Or what happens if it rains all the time? And then he wrote down things he could do. What's the worst case, and what could he do to mitigate that? So misses a call from the taxman. Then the worst case is he might get a fine or possibly a jail sentence. So really, really, what is the absolute worst that can happen? And then how can I mitigate that? Well, I could give them my accountant's address, and he'll know how to contact me. So if anything comes through, he can deal with it. Mm-hmm. Suddenly, he's mitigated that fear, so that becomes a relative non-issue. What if it rains all the time? What's the worst that's going to happen? Well, I'm going to feel really depressed, and it's a drab, dreary, and horrible. Mitigation. Well, I'll make sure I got enough money on my credit card so I can book a ticket to Spain. Yeah. Yeah. No, simple things. So it was going through working out these, facing up to and working out what these fears were, and then working out mitigation strategies, or even it could be that there's this massive fear. What's the worst that could happen? So, taking an example that quite a few people will be able to relate to, you're in a disco, in a nightclub, at a bar, some sort of social setting. You see a person that you think, I'd like to get to know them better. Do you go and ask them out? what's the worst that can happen? They could say, sorry, I'm already attached. I'm not interested. No, I don't want another drink.
Mm-hmm.
And you get a bit of rejection. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you actually sit down and think about it logically, you know, that's not that bad. You're still going to be alive. You're still going to be breathing. Obviously, if you come on with a particularly bad line, you might get slapped. But, you know, if you're nice and friendly and they just say no, most people will let you down gently, then you know. But that's the worst that's going to happen.
Yeah.
It was the same with me for public speaking. I was always terrified of, you know, talking in front of people when I was younger. And then I'm sure we've mentioned this on a previous podcast. So I had what we shall call the incident. Go back to the previous podcast if you want to find out what that is. And, you know, I realized that the worst that could happen is I make a mistake and, you know, maybe they laugh. You know, I'm still here. You know, I'm honestly, I'm not bitter about it. So, you know, and it is, if you confront your fears,
yes,
and you start to work out how to mitigate them,
yes,
things aren't so scary. And all of a sudden that big, terrifying, life-changing, you know, decision suddenly isn't quite so bad.
Sure.
Suddenly, maybe this is possible. Maybe this is practical. As it happens, the gentleman who's doing the TED Talk stayed in the UK for a year.
Yeah.
Traveled to Europe. So, you know, so that I'm worried about being away for 2 months. He ended up being away for a year. Business was never doing, you know, it's never done better. It was absolutely fine. He had a time of his life and really helped him reevaluate his life full stop. But had he not sat down and worked through and confronted his fears, then he would never have taken that chance and he wouldn't have got the outcome that he wanted to.
Sure.
It's not to say that you're always going to be able to completely mitigate it and things won't turn into possibly a disaster. But if you've got plans in place to deal with that, then, you know, you can help to lessen the impact. And, you know, maybe, so for example, if you're thinking, am I going to quit my job and, you know, go freelance or get into this web development gig and things like that? You know, what's the worst that can happen? Well, you know, I could not get any work for a few months. How do I mitigate that? Well, I can financial buffer, or I can, you know, get another job, or, you know, maybe I won't go in with 2 feet. I'll actually just do a bit on evenings and weekends just to get my toe in the water, see how this gig actually works, and then slowly build up. And maybe I could talk to my company about doing fewer hours and, you know, slowly transitioning and things like that. There are always going to be ways that you can think that you may be able to mitigate these things.
Sure.
If you can't, then it's probably something you shouldn't consider doing anyway.
Yeah. When I went freelance, that was a massive, life-changing, decision, because I went from a very stable, comfortable salary. And it was a challenge, because it was like, you're proving now your worth. You're putting your name out there. You've got a brand. You're building a brand, you know, and you only have yourself to blame if it goes wrong, right? Because you are the only one who's doing this thing. And one of my biggest fears, which seems stupid right now, but one of my biggest fears was not being able to afford dinner. Right, just buying general groceries, which I suppose is rational, right? But over a long period of time, you know, because I wasn't sure how long I needed to have a buffer in doing this. I had a financial buffer, because I created a bank account and I started putting money into there, you know, every so often. So that was fine, that was good. But in terms of just general food, right? So, and this does sound daft, but what I ended up doing was I after we made a meal, we ended up freezing portions of the meal and putting it in the freezer. And then I made myself, say, a couple of months worth of food. Our freezer at that time was chock-a-block with things like curries and spaghetti bolognese and all sorts of pasta dishes and all of that crazy stuff. And I was able to visually see these things. And in my head, that was a way of me controlling. It was like, well, I have, you know, a couple of weeks here of not having any money. So or I've got a couple of weeks of food here. So if I don't have any money for those kind of weeks, I can just eat this kind of stuff. That was me trying to make control over this extremely huge unknown thing. And I must say, for full disclosure, there was a period of time when I did go, at the start where it was dry, because you were at the beginning stages of going a full-time freelancer. I did a lot of freelance stuff whilst I was full-time employed, but it wasn't enough to carry to carry me through. Yeah. And it was trying to mitigate that gap, trying to make that gap smaller. So yeah, we did freezing of the food. We did the whole bank account thing, which was such a good idea. And also another thing I did was I invested in technology for the business before actually going full time, which meant that. And it was boring stuff. It was like backup hard drives, and it was, a couple of screens here and there. It wasn't anything like, any kind of sexy technology. It was just things that and a printer, all of those kind of boring things that business needs to have. But I didn't want to buy them when I didn't have anything coming in. Yeah. So I kind of rationed my salary, bought a bunch of this stuff, gave myself a buffer, and then I tried to limit the risk as much as I possibly could do. I was still extremely scared to take the jump.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can well imagine.
Yeah, but it's if anyone's thinking of doing it, it's certainly worth it, I think. The thing is, when you get, like I said, when you've got that sort of bug and it's sort of like itching at you, it's bugging you. I want to be freelance. I want to be somewhere else in my career. You can't get away from that. You can't, that is something that you can't regret. So you kind of need, you owe it to yourself to put these things in place.
You owe it to yourself to try, definitely.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely.
If it doesn't work out, then there's always, there's always the option of going back into full-time employment. It's, or something like that. But, like you said, if you plan and you try to cover all the angles that you can do, then there is certainly in this industry there's more than enough work out there, certainly possible to do.
I think I was more worried about personal failure than I was worried about the financial aspects, all the things that I could write down as things that I would be fearful of. I was more fearful of personal failure, of not being able to do it. And so I wanted to give myself as much things to help me start with. And so what I did is I wrote down all the things that are pretty much like this. I wrote down all the things that I was scared about. And then I tried to put plans in place. I didn't realize it was called fear setting, but I guess it kind of was.
Yeah, I don't know where if that moniker has come directly from the article in the TED Talk that's spawned from it. But yeah, it is about working out. It's disaster planning, really, at a level. Yeah. Just a bit more formalized, where what's the worst that can happen? How do we get around that? Yeah. So yeah, and again, that's something that's used a lot in the industry as well. Yeah. Yeah. Disaster recovery planning and things like that. So. But yeah, it's one of those things when you actually sit and think rationally about fears and then start to work out mitigations, they suddenly don't seem as scary. And you're planning, you go into things with your eyes open. Yeah. There's no reason not to, do the big move to Germany and Mac and things like that I've done. Or
you've done some really big stuff. Yeah. I mean, the stuff that you've done, the moves and stuff, there is so many unknowns to that. Oh goodness, yes. It's changing job is one thing, but changing job and knowing that you're going to another country as well, with different ways of doing things. It's your first language isn't the language that's spoken there anymore. Which is why I've got all the time respect for anybody that's
it's moved across here to take another role. So we're quite lucky at Torpedo. We've got people from a number of different countries. In fact, to be fair, I've been lucky throughout my career. I've always worked with people from very diverse backgrounds, which I find interesting. Talking to people, cultures and things like that, and just their attitude towards things. It can make for a very interesting and enlightened environment to work in, rather than having cookie cutter exactly the same types of employee all the time. But yeah, it certainly is. But sometimes you got to do it because it's it's what you need to do for yourself. Sometimes you have to do it because it's what's right for those around you as well.
Of course.
So certainly, as we've discussed before, one of the moves was as much about family as it was about us. So and again, there's also that although I didn't know about the name of it at the time, that regret minimization framework did come into it. What am I going to regret more? Staying here or moving to Germany? And the same when we came back, which am I going to regret more, staying in Germany or coming back to the UK? And so that has to play into there. It doesn't matter what's going on now. What's my future hold? What do I want out of life? What's what the key thing there? Yeah. But I think all of these techniques for personal development, they all come down to that one thing. It's being able to get you from where you are to where you want to be. And there are 101 different techniques, and the different techniques may not work for you. So you may find that you're the sort of person where the habit setting isn't right for you. You need that goal setting. You need to have that long term. I need to aim for here. Or likewise, you may find that fear setting just isn't the right thing for you. And there are loads of other tools out there and loads of other techniques that you can find to do things. And at the end of the day, they all break down into a very simple, basic rule of knowing where you are, knowing where you want to be, and coming up with a plan to get there, but a plan that helps you and a plan that works for you. And knowing yourself is a key part of all of those things. Self-discovery is a whole other podcast as well.
Self-discovery, yeah, we should do one on that. I think that's good. And I guess these things you can I don't want to say scale them down, but you can change. These are we've done a lot of talk about like life-changing things, but you can actually use these principles for projects, like just building things. Yeah, because your end goal would be, a deliverable. This project is going to go to production. This is going to go live. But then you break down those, and I guess the habit stuff could be, you could set that on personal projects. So if you've got an idea for a personal project and nobody's paying you yet, because this is something that you're just doing on the side, something that the motivation is you doing it, because either you want to learn a technology or because it's going to make something more efficient, or maybe you want to write a series of blogs over a portion of whatever your project is. The habits are, how do you do that? How do you do that in a way that you give that time to do? You mentioned about packing your bag with the gym kit in. It's sort of like, what are the tricks that you can make to put those things in motion? The reminders on your phone, spending an hour here and there. I've got a project that I'm doing. It's a personal project, and I did it like I built it half baked last year, and I opened it up 2 weeks ago, and I thought, oh my God, who on earth wrote this mess? And then I was like, well, none of this has got any unit tests in, none of this has got any level of tests on. So, I don't know whether or not everything works. I can refresh the pages and it was an API. But I don't know like the nuts and bolts of all of this stuff. So what I've tried to do over the course of several evenings is try and write little unit tests around this thing, because it'll give me confidence. I'm not building the thing out. I'm not adding more features to it. I need to get myself a level of confidence of my own code before I actually do that. But because these tests are very tiny and small, as tests should be, I'm able to do like 5 in the evening, after work. I just do 5 tests. And then before you know it, you've got a whole suite of tests. And then you've got a system in place. This is my hope anyway, that then you can start building the features on that you wanted to work on in the first place. But it was kind of my way of kind of getting back into the code. That's just a random story, but of me trying to build some habit in. So every evening I'll just put do 5 tests. That's it.
Yeah, just improve it a little bit.
Then you've
got your black box tests ready, so that when you adjust anything in the code, it still does what it was doing before.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, definitely. I've got like notebooks of things, of ideas that I would like this API to do, but it's kind of like if I looked at that notebook, it would be like a kid in a candy shop. I'll be like, oh, I could do this, I could do that. And then I'll end up spending like a month building it, sort of on the commute or something. And then, I'll think about doing something else and I'll add something else to that. And before I know it, it'll be this untested mess. And then I'll drop it for a year like I've done. And then I'll come back to it again and I'll be in the same problem. So I kind of need to draw a line under the sand and go, right, I need to test what I've done. And in doing that, I need to do like 5 tests a night. And then hopefully within, say, a month or so, it will be at a point where I can actually look at these features. So that's kind of like my goal is like to build out these features. But before I do that, I need to actually make it have some sort of level of confidence of what I've already done.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. and it's about doing those small little steps as well. It's not right. I'm going to write all the tests for this week.
Sure.
No, a little bit of time and celebrate the wins. Yeah, I've got the test passing.
Well, right. the small gratification, the feedback is when I run the unit tests and I can see the number of unit tests increasing and the code coverage increasing too. Because that's sort of like, when you run code coverage, you get like red and amber and then full green. So I want to try and, getting 100% code coverage is certainly not a way of making sure that the code is 100% bug free, because the code is never 100% bug free. But I would like to get it at least 80% or 70% perhaps. At the moment, it's like, 20.
But this is the thing. You'll see obviously you see the increment every time.
You do,
all of a sudden that 20's gone from 30, and a couple of weeks later, before you know it, you're almost at 40%. And that's the thing. It will slowly, and it's like anything in this industry. All these things will slowly build up to make the whole thing. Yeah. Everything is all broken down into tiny bits. We're back to comprehension versus competency.
We are. Yeah, we've done a full circle.
Which is quite nice.
Yeah. Well, on that note, Jeremy, is there anything else that you want to mention in today's podcast?
There was just one thing I was going to say.
Sure.
And that's I'm assuming you know Scott Adams, the guy who writes Dilbert.
Yes. Well, not personally, but yes.
Right, as it happened. So he's quite he does a lot of blogging around the subject of a lot of things. One of them being personal development, and he wrote a book a while ago now called "How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big."
Okay, that's an awesome title.
That's and there are a lot of good tips in there for hacks for personal development. So things like, that's where I got the idea of making sure that the gym is between the house and the home, because it's easier to go to the gym. And these things about make it easy for yourself, and a lot of other tips in there. So anybody who wants to, want something that's easily accessible, it's got his normal humor as well. It's quite a light touch read, but there are some really nice, good gems in there. So that, if anybody's looking for an easy in to the world of personal, self-development, personal development, that sort of thing, then that might be something that might strike a chord with some other people as well.
Yeah. I'll look that out and I'll put a link in the show notes because I think that'll be pretty awesome. It kind of goes well with this topic. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Well, how can people reach you, Jeremy? What's the Twitter handle?
So it's at Balfour74. I'm also on LinkedIn. That should be Balfour74 as well. So they can do that. Obviously, I'm assuming everything will be in the show notes as usual.
Oh, of course. Show notes and on the howtocodewell.fm website as well. Yeah. Well, thank you ever so much, Jeremy, for coming on. It was a pleasure speaking with you, as always.
Yeah.
And thanks ever so much, everyone, for watching on the YouTubes and listening on the podcasts. I'll see you again next time. Happy coding, everyone. Cheers. Bye.